Hilchas Nizkei Mamon, Perek Arba Asar. So this is the last Perek of Hilchas Nizkei Mamon. Again, the first 11 prakim, the Rambam speaks about Nizkei Sheir. The next two prakim, Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, he speaks about Nizkei Beir. And here, the last Perek, he speaks about Nizkei Eish. Perek Arba Asar. Hamadlik b'toich stei chavere, v'avar hadleka v'hizika, chayev l'shalem nezek shalom. Shnemar kisei tziyeish u'motza ketzim, v'nechel godesh yakama v'gemer, shalom yishalem hamaver v'gemer. So there's a chi of Eish, there's an Eish that was mazik is chayev. Now the Rambam speaks about two tziyurim. He speaks about one tziyur when you were actually madlik b'teich stei chavere. So mele, it's like your Eish that you put b'teich stei chavere, and over there, there's no hagbolus whether or not it's a hezik motzi, a hezik not motzi, as we'll learn b'hemshech. Because over there, it's your eish that you were madlik b'teich stei chaveri, you had no right to do it. So memela, it's anything that happens from that eish is your responsibility. Masha'inkin, if you madlik an eish in your own rishus, so over there the question is, was it a dover motzi? Was it expected that the eish that you were madlik in your rishus would go and be madlik in someone else's rishus? So there was nothing wrong. You didn't do anything wrong by putting an eish in your rishus. The only thing that was wrong is that you didn't watch it and to make sure that this eish shouldn't be mazik b'teich chavere. So if it was expected that it should be mazik, so you're chayiv. But if it wasn't expected, then you're not chayiv. That's this two halachas. Again, a madlik b'teich chavere, and then v'over adleika ve'izika, regardless of how far it went, is chayiv l'shalom nezek shalom. Shenema kisei tziyeish u'motza ketzim v'nechel godesh Yakom v'gemer, Shalom Yishalom Hamaver v'gemer. That's the pasuk of Eish. V'habeira mi'ovis nezikni. However, hidlik b'teich reshusei, if he was madlik in his own reshus, so then tzorich laharchik b'seif hametzer kedei shlitaver hadlekel is dechaveri. He has a chiyuv. There's no isur in being madlik an Eish in your reshus. You need the Eish, but on the other end, you have to make sure to be marchik that the Eish shouldn't go over the dechaveri. Now, v'kam shir harchoka, how much do you have to be markik? Is akel if he gave a hadleka. Depends how big the dleka is. Now, v'imle hirchi koroi, if lepel you weren't markik koroi, and v'over ho'esh v'hizika, so then it's chayiv l'shalom nezek shalom. So then you're chayiv l'shalom nezek shalom. So again, there's two tziyurim. There's your madlik b'stei chaveri, so then you're always chayiv for that eish, and then there's your madlik in your own sada, so you're only chayiv if you weren't markik koroi. Now hirche koroi, if you were marche koroi, and lepel v'avre v'zika, there was a ruach she'enim mitzuya v'avre v'zika pater. Shezum makar b'dei shamayim. That's not your responsibility. That's considered a makar b'dei shamayim. V'chenim avre nor eshlul sheyesh b'mayim v'rag ben shmei na'amis. If the fire went over this river or went over this shlul sheyesh b'mayim, is also rag ben shmei na'amis is pater. And b'pashta, this is a din by hidlik b'teich reshusei. When you were madlik b'teich reshusei, and then it went over a nor or a shlulis, so then you're potter. Masha'inkin, if you were madlik b'teich chavere, so then you're always responsible. You're responsible for the eish. You're not responsible because it went where the eish is your eish and it doesn't belong there. So mainly you're responsible for the eish even if it does something which is unusual. Halacha gimel. Over a gather, again we're talking about you were hidlik b'teich reshusei, and lepel passed over a gather, is oimdim goiva hagather. So you have to take all these things into account. You have to see how big is the gather, and how big was the fire, and also was there anything available to be able to spread the fire. If really it wouldn't be regular for it to be able to go over this gather, this distance, this gather, so then it's potter. The imru'uyul is chayv. Now, by medvar mamurim, that we say that is, you have to start measuring how far it is and whether the eish was ruya lava or not. That's be'esh akidacha. So eish that's burning. In other words, it's not so high that it actually bends over. It's an eish that's burning upwards like an eish normally does, and it doesn't have the height that it actually bends. Be'esh akidachas. Avalim hoyel olav gedola. If it had a very big flame, ha'oila which goes up and v'nichfaf and then it bends over. Migave aliyah salav, because it's so tall that it actually bends over, the flame bends over, and vayo eitzim meshuyim showing there was wood there that it could catch onto, is ein la'imah, then there's no assessment. Alafilo over elef amachayev. Whereas when you have a fire which is a containable fire, it's a fire that's going up, you have to know how high the fire is, and how much is available, and how high the gather is, all kinds of details. Masha'inka, when you have a very large flame that's so large that it actually is bending over, so as long as there's wood there, that it's possible that if there's nothing there to catch on fire, so even if you have a large fire, Weistuis, it wouldn't be considered a something to expect that the fire will spread. But Lashon of the Rambam, hoyo lo lav gedei lo hoyo v'nichvav, negeda aliyas alav v'hoyo eitzim mesuyim shom. So then there's no assessment how far it could go. It could reach very far. As the Rambam says, afilo over elefam is also chayav. Now, nafla dleika b'chatzeri. Now, the Lashon nafla dleika b'chatzeri sounds like you are not the one that made the dleika. It was nafla dleika b'chatzeri. That's the pashtus haloshen. And then the nafel geder shlei machmas adleika. So you have a fire in your chutzah which you didn't really make, and then there is a geder that was also there, which bepashtus that geder would have contained the fire. And lepeil, it was nafel geder. The geder fell after there was a fire. The geder fell shlei machmas adleika, and va'avra hadleika b'chatzar acheres. Now the dleika went b'chatzar acheres. So the question is, are you responsible? What's the svara? The svara is it was when the dleika started. So lepeil, it wasn't able to spread. But now lepeil, the gather fell, so now it is able to spread. So the din is imhoy yochel ligder ageder shenofel v'lei gadri. Whereas you have a responsibility, if you have a fire in your rishus, and that fire was made, there was no reason to worry that the fire will spread, because there was a gather. But now that gather fell. The fire didn't cause the gather to fall. Whatever happened, the gather fell. And you have a fire in your rishus. So the din is you are responsible for this fire. So just like the Rambam will say, you have a share, you have an ox, and let's say the ox is in a matzav where it's not going to be mazik, but something happened. Now the ox is in a matzav where it could be mazik. So it's your responsibility, even though you originally, let's say, locked it up. But let's say someone went and opened the lock. So your responsibility to see to it to reclock the lock. In other words, it's your share, and you're responsible for making the lock to lock it. So Aldera is over here. You have a fire in your chutzah. You have a fire in your chutzah. So now this fire, be'emes, originally wasn't able to be mazik, but now it is able to be mazik because the gather fell mi'atzmei, or whatever, has nothing, not machmas fire. But nevertheless, if you're able to go ahead and make this gather to contain the fire, that's your responsibility. That's this din. Let's read again. Nafla dleika b'chatzei. There's a dleika in his chutzah. The Ram doesn't say how the dleika came to his chutzah. So some learn really that it has to be that you actually lit the dleika. If you didn't light the dleika, if you weren't the one that was the maveres abeira, so then you're not really responsible for the dleika. But in the Lashon Rambam doesn't say that. The Rambam says nafla dleika b'chatzeri, and then v'nafel geder shalei machmus hadleika, and v'aver hadleika b'chatzer acheres. This dleika which was nafla b'chatzeri, which b'shas ma'isa wasn't able to be spread, but now it's able to spread. And lepela did spread. Is it was enough time he could have really built the fence up again. So Melechayv says it's his responsibility. He has a fire burning in his chutzner, even though it's nafled leika b'chatzeri. It's his responsibility to see to it that it should be built. If he has a share that's yosef hizik, he should have watched it. So the same thing over here. This fire, which is b'chatzeri, becomes his responsibility, and therefore, even though originally when it was put there, it wasn't really a shaykh to be mazik, but once the gather comes off, so then he's responsible to see to it that that gather should be rebuilt. We're going to learn behemshah that Isha yasai mishum mamene yasai mishum chitzov. In other words, Isha has a din, it's his moment. So Mamela, this dleika, which is b'chatzera, so the Rambam is comparing it to a share, just like he's responsible for his share, he's responsible for his dleika. Now the question is, did he have to be madlik the dleika? So Tesa says in Baba Kama, it's dafka that he was madlik the dleika. Because he was originally madlik the dleika, and then from that dleika came b'chatzera. If he wasn't madlik the dleika, he wouldn't be responsible for the dleika. Lashon Rambam doesn't say that. Rambam just says naflu dleika b'chatzera. He's responsible for a dleika which was naflu b'chatzera, just like he would be responsible for his share. Halacha he, hashaleach is a be'era biyad cheres sheita v'kotten. Is potter midini yodin v'chay midini shamayim. Now what does a be'era mean? A be'era over here, the Rambam is going to tie choice. He means he sent a coal. He sent a coal with a cheres sheita v'kotten. B'med dvar mamurim shemos alehem gacheles. He gave them a coal. V'libu, and they blew at it. And therefore they caused the coal to become a fire. Because it's normal, when you give a coal, So Pashas, the coal will slowly be extinguished. And so therefore, there's no reason to suspect that anything is going to happen. But if you gave him a shalheves, so just like if you have a fire and then you have a ruach mitzuya, it's normal for a ruach or mitzuya to go ahead and spread this fire. And you're chayiv, so all that is over here. You're giving it to a cheresh sheit of a cotton. So they are like the ruach mitzuya. So it's regular for them to go ahead and spread the fire. So and it's your fire. You gave it to the cheresh sheit of a cotton, which they themselves aren't responsible. But you're responsible because you put it to a ruach mitzuya. Memela chayiv shari ma'asav garmo. The fact that you gave it to the cheresh sheit of a cotton, that's good, and this has it. Now that's talking about if you gave a be'era b'yad cheresh sheit of a cotton. So there's a difference. If you gave him a gachelis, you're potter. If you gave him a shalevis, you're chayiv. However, sholach is a be'era b'yad pikeach. If you gave it to a pikeach, v'zeh pikeach shehiver chayiv l'shalom. So this pikeach, he becomes the responsible for this eish. So if he goes ahead and causes a fire, so he's chayiv l'shalom. V'ashalech is potter. V'chein eminiach shomer lishmer abeir. He didn't send the fire with anybody. He has a fire. And he appoints someone, that person should be watching this fire. So that person that's watching this fire becomes responsible for the fire. Just like we learned before, that a person that's responsible for the bear, he's a shamer on the bear, he becomes responsible for the bear. That's part of the dinam of a shamer, nichnas tachas habaylam. So al der is over here, the person that's responsible for the fire, he's nichnas tachas habaylam, he's responsible for the fire. Halacha zayin, echad hevi sa'ur, ve'echad hevi sa'etzim. Someone brought fire, but the fire, how long does a fire last? You have some fire, but it's just going to go out very easily. Now the other person comes along and he brings wood. So that wood is causing that fire to be able to stand. So Hamevi say it's some chayiv. The person that brought the wood is chayiv. Because the person that brought the fire nothing would happen if the wood wouldn't have been brought. Or what about fakert echad hevi sa'etzim? And then the echad hevi sa'ur, the second person is the one that brought the fire and connected it to the eitzim. So then it's Hamevi sa'ur chayiv. So the person that brought the eitzim is not chayiv. Because Lepel, he didn't do anything. Now, Bo Acher Veliba, someone brought eitzim and someone brought fire, and Lepel, you have a burning fire, but there was another person that came Veliba, and he blew at it, and he caused that the fire should spread. He caused that the fire should spread. It was you had a contained fire, and now by blowing at the fire became bigger, and eventually it spread. So that is Hamalah B'chayim. So even though they taka made the fire, but their fire wasn't anything. The ones that brought the wood and the fire didn't do anything. But the malab is the one that chayiv. Now libosei ruach she'eni mitzuya tamid. So that someone brought wood, someone brought fire. So you have a fire, but this fire is not going to do anything. And lepel, what caused it to spread was a ruach she'eni mitzuya tamid, not a regular wind. So then harei kulam pturim, everyone is spotted. It's like something's b'dei shamayim. Liba v'libosei ruach. In other words, he blew at it, and together with the ruach that blew at it, so through that it spread. Whereas the Ruach itself wouldn't have been able to spread it. And he himself also wouldn't have been able to spread it. But nevertheless, Chayev, Sharehu Garam. So even though he's not really the complete Mazik, because it was partially Libasi or Ruach, but he caused that it should be able to spread. And the din is when the person's Gairim a Hezik, and that Hezik definitely happens. We'll learn Behemshech later on in Hilchas Chevel Mazik, that if a person is Gairim a Hezik, even though he didn't directly Mazik, he was Gairim the Hezik, but that gram hezek was an eifan that it was vadei hezek, it was a vadei, so then he's chayiv. So over here also, liba v'libasi ruach, even though he didn't do it on his own, he did it together with the ruach, but nevertheless chayiv, sharehu garam. V'chol hagerim lahazik, mishalim nezik shalim, n'hayofen shebenechosim kishar kol hamazikim. Just like a mazik mamish has to pay min ha'idis, min hayofen shebenechosim, so also someone that's a gerim lahazik, like this case over here, where he's saying liba v'libasi aruch, so the Rambam is calling him a goyim mazik. He's not a mazik himself because the hezik didn't really come only from him, but he was a goyim hezik because it was liba v'libasi aruch. So he also has to pay minayofa shebenachos. Halacha ches eish shiyotza va'achla eitzim e'avonim me'yofer. The chiddush here really is avonim me'yofer, which is not really royal eish. Fire doesn't really last. Fire doesn't really consume avonim and offer, but it ruins the avonim and the offer. Singes it causes it to get ruined. So Eishi Yotzev Ochle Eitzim Me'avonim Me'yofer, all of these cases is Chayev L'Shalom Shnema, U'motza Koitzim Oyasoda. So we learn that Oyasoda means even the actual field, not only the things that are growing on the field, but the actual field, he ruined the field. It was a plowed field, for example, and now he's going to have to replow it, maybe refertilize it, etc. Now, ochlo godish ukietzbe. If you have a fire that's eating a godish is a silo where you have tfuah there, you have a pile of tfuah there, you have tfuah stored there, something to store tfuah. V'hayu kelim tmunim b'teich godish, and there were kelim inside this godish. So it depends what kind of kelim were there. Im hayu kegein merigim ukli boker ukietzeben midavarim shederech anshi asod l'tomnim b'godish. A godish is where you store the tfuah. Eventually, you're going to have to thresh them, and then you're going to have to do all kinds of other things to them. So those marigim are those boards that you use for threshing. You put on top of the tfuah, and the behemoth step on it. And the clay bucker is also things that you put on the bucker in order to use them for threshing or for working in the fields. So these are things that which normally you would put in the godish, because lepel, when you're going to start taking out from the godish and going ahead and threshing, so you're going to want to use these items. So it's regular for them to be hidden over there. Imhayu clay merigim, which is again boards that are used for threshing, or clay bakar, the kalim that are used to harness the cattle. Bidvarim shederech anshi asod l'tomnim begodish. So then chayiv l'sham, that wouldn't go into the gather of tomim. Masha'enkein hayu begodim uklischuches ukietzbem. If there were begodim uklischuches, things which are not normally found in the godish, so it's potter al kelim. So potter al kelim. So there's a din, this new din that tomon, a special din that tomon is potter by eish. Tomon is potter, and we're saying what's called tomon. Tomon is something which wouldn't normally be expected to be found there. Whereas we're finding over there begodim or klischuches in a godish, it's not normally expected to be found there. So then there's the ptur of eish being potter on tomon. Masha'enkin, if something which is normally expected to be found there is there, so then that's not potter ala tomon. Halacha tes. Bamedvar mamurun, this chilik, whether the tomon was something that's regular there or it's not regular for it to be there. We're saying if it's regular for it to be there, you're chayiv. If it's not regular for it to be there, then you're potter. Bamedvar mamurun is madlik b'teich stei chaveri. If it's your madlik b'teich stei chaveri and it's regular for this type of tomon to be there, then you're chayiv. Avol b'madlik b'teich shalei and v'avol l'tei chaveri. So then the ptur of tomon is potter al kol hakelim tmunim begodish. So this difference between what kind of keli is tomon begodish, whether it's keli that's regular for it to be there or not, is only when you are madlik b'teich stei chaveri. So then those keli which are regular to be there, you're chayiv for. Masha'enkin, if you're madlik b'teich shalcha, so then even if you're mazik things which are regular for it to be there, you're also potter on tomon. So there's also a din tomon. Avol. However, even though when you're potter on tomon, and this din of avol is not only on this case in halacha tes, the Maggid Mishnah says it also applies to halacha ches, which things that are irregular. Ava mishalemu shir mekei makelim. V'rei nesekilu humoli godish shel chitim shel seirim. So if you have a godish, and in that godish there are kelim. So the first thing is, are you chayiv for the kelim? So we say as if it's mistake, if you are madlik b'stei chaveri, it depends if it's regular for the kelim to be there or it's not regular for the kelim to be there. For these kelim to be there, that's if it's b'stei chaveri. If you are madlik b'tei your own field, so either way you're not chayiv for those kelim. However, even if you're not chayiv for the kelim, whether it's we're talking about because it's irregular, because when you were madlik at b'stei chaveri, or it was regular or irregular, when you were madlik b'tei shalei, you have to pay for that place where the kelim were as if they were the godish itself. Avul mishalamu shir mekei makelim v'rei nesekilu humoli godish shel chitim shel seirim. Because you're not completely potter. You're potter only from the worth of the kelim, but you have to see whether or not if that kelim wouldn't have been there, it would have been filled with the godish. How much would have that been? And for that you have to pay, regardless. So even when you're not paying for tomon, you have to pay for that place of the tomon as if it would have been filled with the things that is being tomon in. Halacha yud. Hamadlik b'teich stei chaveri, and v'yotzo eish v'nechel hagodish, and v'hoye gdi kofusle, there was a gdi next to this godish. They're not next, they were tied up to the godish. And v'evet samuchle, and there was an evet next to the godish. So there was a gdi kofus to the godish and an evet samuchle. And v'nisraf imei, and the gdi was nisraf together with the godish, or if the evet was also nisraf. So the mice says you're not responsible for the evet, because the evet should have run away. The evet should have seichel to run away. So therefore you're not responsible for the evet. And since you're not responsible for the evet, so you are responsible sai for the godish and sai for the gdi. The gdi was kofus. couldn't have ran away, and the Godish was the Godish. So therefore, you're responsible. And if you would have been responsible for the Eved, so then you're not responsible for everything else because it's Kamle B'derabminei. But over here, you're now responsible for the Eved because the Eved was only Samuchle, so you are responsible, Sai for the Godish, Sai for the Gdi. Shekein Dereb Bnei Adam Lasses Begodish. Now these words, it's regular for the Gdi to be in the Godish, so therefore, even though the Gdi, Sasvara, maybe you potter on the Gdi, if it would be irregular for the Gdi to be in the Godish, maybe you wouldn't be Chai for the Gdi. But since it's regular for the Gdi to be next to the Godish, tied to the Godish, so therefore you're Chai for the Gdi as well. Now, however, Hoya Evet Kofeslei, Ugdi Samuchle Venisrafim a potter. Now over here you potter for the whole Godish, because since the Eved was Kofeslei, so Memela, that's this din of Ishay Mishum Chitzov, that you're responsible as if you killed the Eved, as for killing the Eved, and therefore if you're responsible for Eved Kofeslei, so Memela you potter not only in the Gdi, you potter on the Godish. So really the idea whether Gdi Samuchle Venisrafim is not really relevant. Because lepel, whether you're chai for the gdi or not chai for the gdi, you potter on everything. You potter on everything because of kamle b'derabminei. Halacha Yudalef. Hamashil mokim lechaveri, v'higdish bei. Lepel, he gave him a place to make a pile of tvua, and v'hitman bei kelim, and he went ahead and he also put kelim into this godish. And lepel v'hishel hamashil, the person that lent him this area in order to make this godish went ahead and burned this Godish, and V'sarav HaGodish is Einei Mishalem Ele Dmei Godish Bilvad. He doesn't have to pay him for the Kalim that were Tomun in this Godish, he only pays him for the Godish itself. And he also has to pay for the Mekaim of these Kalim as if they would have been filled with Godish. The Ramar brings from the Minchas Chinuch that the reason is because the Pashtos, he didn't give him Rishus, he gave him Rishus only for the Godish and not for the Kalim. So therefore, it's kila. He was put the kelim there shalei b'rshus. And Mamela, he's not chai for the kelims. The Ram doesn't say it. The Ram doesn't say why. The Ram is saying it behemshel to the hilchus tomim. Over here, the Rambam is saying that in a case where you are mashal in the place to make a godish, and that person in this godish put kelim tmunim, so you're potter for those kelim tmunim. Not clear why you're potter for the kelim tmunim. Again, Minchas Chinuch says because you're not expected to. You didn't have rishus to put kelim tmunim. Now, Hishile Mokim Lahagdish Chitim, Vehigdish Seirim, a Lahagdish Seirim, Vehigdish Chitim. So either he gave him Rishus for Chitim and he did Seirim, or he gave him Rishus for Seirim and he did Chitim. A Shehigdish Chitim, or Lepeli made a pile of Chitim, and Vechipam Beseirim, and the outside covering was Seirim. A Shehigdish Seirim, Vechipam Bechitim. In all these cases, is Eine Mishal, Le'ele, the Mei Seirim Bilvad. In other words, Seirim is cheaper than Chitim. Lepel, he gave him Rishus only for Seirim. So if there was Taka Seirim, so he's only Chayiv for Seirim. Even if there was Chitim, so L'chura there would be a Svara that he should be Chayiv for Chitim, but Lepel, he only had a Rishus for Seirim, so Lemel, he's only Chayiv for Seirim. Now if it was Chipam B'Seirim or Chipam B'Chitim, it makes no difference. Lepel, since he only had a right, the Rishus was for Seirim, so therefore even if you put Chitim, or even it was Chipam B'Chitim, or is chipam b'seirim, either way, he's only chayev for the mei seirim. Halacha Yud Beis. Hamadlik is habira shel chaverei, and over here we're talking about he was madlik b'teich shel chaverei. He was a madlik bira shel chaverei. So the din is mishalim kol ma shebeteicha shekein derab neyodim l'hal levniach kol kileim v'chol chefzeim babatim. So just like we learned before, that if you're madlik godisha shel chaverei, and you went ahead and you were madlik b'teich stei chaverei, so you have to pay for the tomon, which is regular for it to be there. So Aldera is over here. He was madlik bira shel chaveris. So anything that's in the bira is regular for it to be there. People keep all kinds of things in their houses. Now that's the question. Now the question is, what was actually in the house? So the din is v'chol sheyitin balabayis. If the balabayis time is that he had these things in his house, he can't prove it, but he's tying. We know for sure that this other person was madlik bira shel chaveri. Now the other person, the nizik, is timing. This was in the house. Maybe you owe me this amount of money. So the din is harei a nishba ben kittas chayfetz v'neitel. He's a nishba ben kittas chayfetz. V'neitel shvua zu b'divri seifim k'mei is bar. I mean, it's not only the shvua is b'divri seifim. The right to take the money is doch b'divri seifim. The right to be able to be toyin this money is b'divri seifim. And the chacham said that he could take it with a shvua. Aber bulvad sheyitin dvarim shu amid b'em. He has to be only kind of things which you assess that this person is shaykh to have such a thing, or shehi lamud lias esim dvarim shetoim because that's like knows either he's tining that this is the type of furniture, he had a very expensive furniture, so you have to know whether this person is like a wealthy man, you expect him to have such wealthy furniture, or he's tining had very expensive items that were in his house, that was a pekudin. So also you have to see whether or not it's regular for people to keep gdeinis in this person's house. But if he's tining something which either it's regular for him to have it, it's be his, or it's regular for people to be mafkid next to him, so then he could be tainet and he gets it, he's a nishba v'netel. Allah yid gimel. Gomel shuhutom pishton. You have a gomel which is loaded with pishton, and ve'eva b'shus harabim is passing in the shus harabim, and lepeil is nichnas pishtoni l'techa chanus. The pishton that was loaded onto this gomel, onto this camel, went into a chanus, and v'dolka b'neidah shel chanveni, and it got lit up, this pishton, with the neidah shel chanveni. And lepeil v'hidlik is kol abira. The entire house got burnt from this fire, which got caught on the pishton, which was on the gomel. So the din is Baal HaGomel Chayev. The Baal HaGomel is Chayev. Mipnei Shehir B'Masei. Because Lepel, he loaded it up too much. He loaded it up to an extent where this load is going to go into the Chanus. Ben Sha'omda, Ben Shalei. So we're saying that, again, the fire was caught by the Gomel, and now from the Gomel, it extended into the entire Bira. Now the question is, the place where the Gomel actually put the fire, the fire that was on the Gomel, the place where the Gomel actually burnt, so that's clearly the Gomel went ahead, you're responsible, and the Gomel is responsible. The Baal HaGomel is responsible. But l'chura, the fire that goes from the Gomel, the Gomel, the pishton of the got caught with fire. So that's the responsibility of the Baal HaGomel. And now Lepel, this Gomel went ahead and lit the Bira, and Lepel, and from that fire extended further. It's not like the Gomel directly made the fire. The Gomel lit the Bira, and then eventually the fire extended further. So the svara is that l'chura, if you say ishim mishum chitzov, so l'chura, that fire is considered like chitzov of the gomel, and chitzov of the gomel should have a din of tzreiris, and therefore taka, there's those that learn that you taka only chayav achotzin nezek. In other words, on the part that the gomel actually burnt directly, so you chayav a nezek shalom. But on the part that the fire extended from the gomel, that you only chayav achotzin nezek. But the Rambam is saying not like that. Vice, the Rambam is holding that the fire is considered the fire of the Baal HaGomel. It's not the Gomel's fire. It's the Baal HaGomel. Since the Baal HaGomel loaded the Gomel too much, and now this fire was caught onto the Gomel, so it becomes fire of the Baal HaGomel. And the fire of the Baal HaGomel, he's chayiv for this fire. I'll call upon it. But the Ram clearly writes that you're chayiv and ezek shalom for the whole bira. Now, hiniach hachem v'nineri mibachutz, so then hachem v'nichayiv, av b'dmei ha'pishton, because mipnei shehiniach neri b'chutz, so fakert. So it's the fire of the Baal HaChanus, and he was mazik, side the pishton and side the bira. So mele, the Baal HaChanus is chayav. Va'afilu ner Chanukah, even if this ner that was outside the Chanus was a ner Chanukah, so the churu was a ner shel mitzvah, but nevertheless, that's not a reason why you could keep it out. So mele, so bekitzer, if the fire was inside the Chanus and the pishton extended into the Chanus, so then the Baal HaGomel is chayav. The Baal HaGomel is chayav. Masha'inkin, if the fire was outside the Chanus, so then the Baal HaChanus is chayav. Halacha Yudalet, HaKoifev Kamasi Shel Chaveira Lefnei Oesh Ache Tidlak. So someone has a kam, he has tfuah, and lepel, the way the tfuah is right now, the fire wouldn't have gotten to it. But he went ahead and he bent the kam Shel Chaveira Lefnei Oesh, and that caused that the fire should be able to get to it. Now the question is, and what madre, how easy would the fire be to get to it after he was kef of Kamasi Shel Chaveira? So if he made it accessible to a Ruach Matsuya, so Mela, since it's like him bringing, just like a person would bring the Ruach Matsuya towards the Zach and caused it to burn, so he would be Chayiv. So Aldera's over here, he brought the thing to the Ruach Matsuya, so he's also Chayiv. But over here, if he brought it to the fire, but he brought it to the fire only, that with a Ruach She'ena Matsuya, it could happen. And Lepel, a Ruach She'ena Matsuya came and happened. So since he didn't bring it in a way that a Ruach Matsuya should bring it, so therefore he's patim medini yodam. But on the other hand, why did he bring this and make it accessible even to a ruach she'ena matzuya? So therefore he's chayiv medini shemayim. That's his din. Hakoifev kamasi shel chaveri lefnei oesh ad shetidlak is im eino eish magas lo ela beruach she'ena matzuya. If the only way for the eish to get there is only beruach she'ena matzuya, and that's what happened, so the din is patim medini yodam chayiv medini shemayim. Masha'enkin, if it would have been with a ruach matzuya, so that he would have been chayiv medini yodam as well. That's din number one. And then v'hatoimen kamasi shel chaveri bo'ofer ibeteven. So that you have a kama shel chaveri, which a fire is coming, and there's the pastor of the fire is going to burn this kama. Now lepel the bala eish is going to be chayev. So he went ahead and he covered this kama. So now this kama became tamun, and as a result of that, the bala eish is potter. So he caused that the bala eish should be potter, but which obviously means that the nizik is not going to have anything to collect from. But he wasn't a mazik; he was just causing that there should become a ptur of tamun, and memela the mazik should be potter. V'atem and kamasi shchaveri ba'oferi b'teven and va'avro eish va'achlei and lupela ruined it. So Hari Atemin, the person that made this made it tamun, is potem b'dini yodam v'chayim b'dini shemaim. He can't be chayim b'dini yodam. He didn't do any hazik. He just caused that the mazik should be potter. But v'chayim b'dini shemaim, because lepel he's causing the nizik hazik. Mipnei shamadlik zeish potter al atomen. The madlik is eish to become potter. So that's why he's chayim b'dini shemaim. He caused that the madlik, which would normally would have been chayiv, is now potter. Halacha tezvav eish she'avra. He was mazik a person, and obviously in a way that the person couldn't have prevented it. So the din is Hari Amavir chayiv ben ezokov is chayiv ben nezek ubeshiftei uberipuye ubetzayre ubebashtei ki'ilu hizika biyade. So that's this din that ishim mishum chitzov, and the hezek that happened through the eish is as if it happened from him himself. She'aval pi she'ishay momenihu. It's also harehu kimei shehizik bechitzov. It's as if he was mazik bechitzov, and therefore he's chayiv also for nezek for ripu sheves and tzari ripu sheves and beishas. Aval mezika behemte iberes adam, so that in chayiv elu benezik bulvat kimei shebiyanu. This whole din of the chamisha dvarim, that's only adam hachevel. So over here the din is that this eish has a din of an adam hachevel because it has a din that he was. That it's Isha Mishum Chitzah, that Isha Mishum Chitzah. Halacha Tezayin, Kol Teil D'Soesh Arin Keish Ketzat, Hiniach Even Isakin Imasa B'Reish Gagei, and V'noflu B'Ruach Matzuya V'Yiziku, is Chayev L'Shalom Nezek Shalom. Because that's the regular din of Eish. Eish is mazik with a Ruach Matzuya, with something else. Shekol Elu Ki Eitzvem Tuldas HaBe'erein. It's a tulda fire. V'noflu B'Ruach She'ena Matzuya V'Yiziku is potter, just like a Eish, which was mazik with Ruach She'ena Matzuya is potter. So al derech zeh, these told us eish, which was mazik, but ruach she'en mesuya is also potter. Slikulu hilchas Nizkei Mamon b'seyayta d'shmaya.